to the dance floor. Prepare for madness.
When I stay here, I risk everything. I leave everything behind. Said,
Kehidupan
Can I buy you ladies a drink each?
Yeah?
You want something stronger?
No.
Sure.
Yeah.
You twins?
No. Guess who's older, me or her? Bet you're older the size of that belly on you.
Hey, hold on, that's all muscle, love.
Here, muscle man, see if you can do this. Watch. Oh, no, my legs.
Yeah! You can't be doing that in here, girl.
Why not? What hurts you doing?
Put it out or get out.
Sure, they've done far worse and you still serve them.
Yeah, far
You
worse.
should go on now, girls.
We're not going anywhere. We haven't done anything wrong.
Someone shut that fucking hanging up.
You don't know who you're dealing with, wee girl.
Yeah, I do. 12th of July, 92. Busy day for you, wasn't it, Cherry? My ma told me what you did. Our dad was one of the 26-year bomb killed. She doesn't even remember him. And you lot got early release to keep the peace.
You might be a free man, Jerry, but you're still a murderer.
Emma!
You don't scare me, mister.
Do a
What are you
fucking
gonna do,
that.
huh? What are you gonna do, huh?
Get those fuckers out of here now!
That's it, girls. Bye-bye.
Get the fuck!
Bye-bye, girls.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another session of Film Talk with me, Noval Yazid. I'm the Festival Co-Director of Europe on Screen 2021. And we are now going to have a session with Cathy Brady. She is the director of Wildfire. Cathy, if you can unmute and turn on your camera. There you go. Hello, good morning there.
Good morning.
Yes. Okay, Cathy, before we begin, allow me to explain some rules of this session to our audience. You can join us via Zoom or via YouTube in our channel, Europe on Screen. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions at the Q&A box at the right bottom of your screen. You can ask your questions either in English or in Indonesian. If it is in Indonesian, I will help translate it to English to you. I understand that you are in the UK at the moment, Kath?
Yeah. I'm based in Hastings.
I see. Okay, I hope it looks like a lovely morning there.
It's
The weather is
really
good.
nice. Like it feels like we're getting the tail end of an extra summer. So I'm all for it.
Okay, great. Okay, so we started screening your film Wildfire yesterday, and I'm fascinated by the film. And well, thank you for making the film for first and foremost, because we do not see many Irish films or films set in Ireland about sisterhood. So what made you interested in this theme, and how did you arrive at the story?
You know, you're right. We don't see many films in Ireland about sisterhood, but I actually don't think we see that many films about sisterhood across the world. You know, two complex female characters right at the front of a film, we don't see enough of, you know, and I do think that the appetite is changing, and I do think, you know, there is a focus that that is thankfully changing. In terms of where the inspiration came from, it came from actually casting first. I had worked with Nika and Norjian separately on different projects. And it was because I'd had the opportunity to work with them before that I realized that they had an incredible depth in terms of the kind of characters they wanted to sink their teeth into, but also that they had this fierceness at their heart, you know, and there was a braveness in being both vulnerable and courageous. And I love the polarity of that. And the fact that both of these actors had it in bucket loads, I was like, what would happen if I put this cast together? And that's really where it started. We finally sat down together, we had a talk, and I was like, what kind of stories do you want to tell? And it was like what you're saying, we just didn't see enough fierce women at the heart of films. That was our goal. And then we spent a number of weeks back and forth talking about real stories and things that inspired us. And I had shown the two actresses a clip from a documentary called Madness in the Fast Lane, where you see twin sisters have a shared psychosis and they're found walking along the middle of the M6 motorway in England. And I showed them the clip of what happened. And I think we were so startled. We were so taken back. And yet these two sisters behaved in such a synchronicity kind of way that we wanted to understand what would cause a bond to be so intense, and that they would go to this place of danger together. And that really began our journey of discovery in the film, and we began building fact and fiction hand in hand.
It's quite unusual since you didn't have story in place, and then, well, these two actors are already attached to your project. So in a way that they develop the characters with you together, so they know very well in the beginning. Would you say that eventually the filming process went, I would say, more smoothly than if it is like the other way around?
Well, I think, you know, because we started in an untraditional way. And I think that's what makes the performances so striking in this film. Like, they do feel like sisters because they spent 5 years intimately getting to know each other, building that chemistry. Often when you're making a film, you're lucky if you get a 2-week rehearsal with an actor before they start. You know, that's often the case. But we had 5 years to kind of cross-reference and build this story together. And it meant that when we went to set, there was no improvisation. It was all fully scripted. But the film still has this energy of something unpredictable about to happen. And I think it's because by that stage, the characters and the performances so lived in that it gives this kind of electric energy that, you know, especially you see in the dance scene, which is really, you know, they're very, very present as actors. And it did mean that when we were on set, we had an incredible shorthand, you know, because we had that time over the years. So when it came to actually shooting the film, I didn't have much in the way of performance notes. You know, it was very much about gently nudging maybe moments that needed to be lifted up a little bit more. But by that stage, we really had the nuts and bolts of what we were making, and it was all very much shorthand. You know, it was more like looking at each other, go, great, let's move on, you know?
Well, that's great. So there is this bond between them and sort of like immediate understanding between them. And well, actually that answers my next question, because I'm curious, this film features little dialogue between them. It relies on silence, and silence has to be conveyed vividly by the actors playing the characters. And since you explained the method, just the process just now, it's clear to me that, like what you said, they really lived in the characters for years and they're able to express without words.
And I think, they do make it look so effortless in terms of the performance,
True.
but
Yeah.
in truth, that took time. Obviously there was the instinct that they kind of, they worked in an interesting way, that they unlocked things in each other, but they worked with a vocal coach to kind of get the right resonance of their voice, so they spoke similarly. And because Nika would speak, with a much deeper voice, and Norton, when she was doing the northern accent, was much higher in her nose. So we wanted to find something that would feel like it became from the same family, the same location. So they did a lot of work on that, but as well as that, they did a lot of movement workshops so that they had a similar walk. They did the dance workshop. So there was a lot of work to and even their hair color was dyed in a way that sometimes from behind you weren't sure which sister, which becomes interesting again in the dancing. You don't know which sister are you on. Yes. So we played with a lot of physicality and being able to kind of seamlessly blend between the two sisters. But what you're talking about, the subtext, the nuance, the exchange between each other, I think, you get that when you build trust with actors, and they trust each other and they trust you. And it allows a character and a moment to sink that little bit deeper, because when an actor trusts what's happening, what's unfolding, they're more willing to go to places they don't expect, which is often truer to life, And I think, the ability of how they read each other, both as actors and characters, is fascinating, and I think you get that when you have a really tight bond. And I suppose we were building to this idea of a shared psychosis. So what we were finding in our research, it really did become about almost what it felt like a psychic connection, because it's a lot about instinct and gut and I think the two actresses really conveyed that really powerfully.
And well, you already mentioned the dancing scene, which is the crucial point, the pivotal point of the film. Did you develop this scene together with them? How did you arrive at this scene?
Well, it's interesting because when we began workshopping the film, as I said, we didn't have a script, and where I wanted to begin with was physicality. And I wanted both actors to realize if they were playing characters that had certain mania in terms of energy, that there would be highs and there would be lows. So instead of me sitting down talking about this, I wanted to get into the physicality very quickly. So a way of accessing that for me was music. So the very first workshop we did we had gathered about 50 images, and I had a playlist of songs that I felt like opened up different primal energies. And one of the first songs I played was Patti Smith's Horses. So it's about a 9-minute track and it's quite primal. And I said to them, you need to match the energy of the song. And Nika was someone who was incredibly physical. Her dad was an athlete. So she threw herself straight into it with a really high energy. And I think that was very interesting for Norjane to witness that, because she realized, oh, this is where we're starting. So then to match that, Norjane then had to go in higher, and then Nika went higher. So what became very interesting is they realized at some point, if they stopped fighting for status and they just were present with each other, something much more powerful would open up. So I had all this footage recorded, and I knew witnessing I had something really special. So for me, I was like, I want to put this moment in the film. And, I think it was by the first draft of the script that it made sense where to put it. So it was always in there, but it was inspired from the very first day, which is fascinating. And a lot of what the girls do in the film is instinctually what they did in the very first workshop. So we copied some of the movements. We did finesse some of it for camera, but a lot of the nuance and the detail is what they did instinctually.
Speaking of the camera, I love how you how you shot that scene with their movement, their dances. At one point, they are heading north south, like the like the theme of the film. So, what was the shooting like for this particular scene? How did you choreograph it meticulously?
Um, yes, in many ways. I think why it feels quite different within the context of the film is because myself and Christelle, the DP, we wanted to be very selective when we decided to go handheld. And the reason being is that when we do go handheld, all of a sudden we wanted the audience to feel something very visceral. So there's only 2 moments in the entire film where we're handheld. So the rest of it is tracks or steady cam or it's very subtle nudges in. So Christelle was, she sat in on she's seen the rehearsal footage, from the very first workshop, but she sat in on the rehearsal with the choreographers. So we got to look at the dance, we got to look at the shape of it. And then Christelle is someone who's very instinctive. And what's interesting as well as her about a DP, she's the exact same height as Nika and Nora Jane. So there's no looking up, there's no looking down. She's just right on at their level, which I think is fascinating. And so we had choreographed it in terms of, what she was going to be doing, because she was using an easy rig as well, going Steadicam. So she needed some support, someone to lift her up from the ground. And, but we tried to keep it as fluid as possible, so that the energy, so I feel like we did a lot of big takes. Obviously it's been cut together. It's not a continuous shot, but to keep the momentum, I think a lot of it was shot continuously.
And one other thing that I noticed, that you begin the film with archival footage and news, archival footage of bombs and news. I'm always curious, how do you decide which footage that can give way to your narrative, since it is put at the very beginning of the film?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the archive wasn't at script stage. It was something that came about in post-production. I think when we realized that maybe in Irish audiences, particularly in Northern Irish audience, a lot of these themes and history is inherent. It's something that's known, it's trusted. But what we realize is when the story goes wider and goes more international, like for example, screening now in Indonesia, like people might not be aware of the recent conflict, of how we got to the point where we are now, where Brexit is happening, and now we're questioning the border. And so it was important to go backwards to realize that, the peace was fought really hard for. And the Good Friday Agreement, it gave us dual nationality, both, you can be both Irish and British, or either or, but as well as that, like we had a seamless border between the Republic of Ireland and the North of Ireland. But part of that was terrorists were released back into communities that they would have, people were maimed and murdered. And that was the price for peace. And it was the price of peace that people were willing to pay, because nobody wanted this conflict carrying on. We had 30 really grueling years of it, and over 3,000 people died, which might seem like a small number, but for a small area, that's quite significant. And I felt the archive was important to kind of take us the journey from, the 70s, the 80s to the 90s to present day, so that we understand the ripple effect of how living in that location has impacted on that family and that community. And I think this has been it's been a tricky balance, I guess, with Wildfire, because I feel like I never wanted to make a political film, but somehow once you start to settle a character in a certain location, you give them a certain kind of backstory, a certain circumstances. You can't separate the social and political themes. But I hope that the film, it does allow an audience to step inside the shoes of these characters and to walk with a particular family, a particular bond within a family, so that you get the more lived in experience rather than the political statistics.
Cathy, we already have some questions from our audience who are joining now. Let me address these questions. I would like to start from the bottom, from Tiara Sakar Ayu. She asked, "Hi Cathy, I watched your film yesterday in the festival and was intrigued with the bond of the sisters. The dance scenes was my favorite. I was wondering about how their mother's death played an important role and revealed unaddressed depression or trauma. Is it also the message that you want to convey? How is depression, trauma, or mental health issue being addressed in your country?"
Well, there's a real mental health crisis in Northern Ireland, but I think actually, everywhere within the UK. But what we find through our research, because we began looking at, okay, this real event that happened, the twin sisters were found on the motorway, it was a shared psychosis. So we began speaking to experts in the field of psychosis and shared psychosis. And one of the threads that became apparent was sometimes psychosis comes from a repressed trauma in the past that hasn't been dealt with. So in a way, it kind of forces itself back into the present in a very abstract way for the body, mind, spirit to make sense of it. And then what we realized is that in Northern Ireland, there's a lot of studies been done on intergenerational trauma. So that's basically a trauma that's happened within one generation that isn't sort of somehow understood. So it's passed on to the next generation. And we're seeing a lot of that happening. Now we're seeing that through incredibly high suicide rates, some of the highest in Europe, really high usage of antidepressants. And what we're seeing is there's a generation that hasn't experienced firsthand the troubles, the conflict, yet they're incredibly troubled. So if you step back, you kind of go, well, what's happening here? And I suppose what we wanted to look at between the mother and her daughters is the mother, in a way, was grieving the loss of her husband through a bomb. And somehow, when the Good Friday Agreement happened, people didn't want to talk about the conflict. They needed to push that down. They needed to move on for the sake of peace. But that meant that a lot of pain and hurt was being pushed down. And people who maybe kind of felt that they didn't get justice or any sense of redemption, that it was left unquestioned and it was left to fester. So I suppose what we might have considered, the way the mother would have maybe looked after the children, she might not have been fully present. She might not have been able to caregive the way maybe someone in a different country would have. Because she was going through her own personal conflict, but also within the community of what was happening. She was in survival mode, quite blinkered. So I suppose what we look then with Lauren and Kelly is they don't fully know what's happened to mother, her own experience. Lauren has a little bit more fun understanding, but it terrifies her. So she buries it down. Whereas Kelly is on the opposite side. She's missing gaps of information, which often has happened. We find in the case studies that some parents didn't tell their children fully what might have happened, their grandparent, or what the cause of death was. They downplayed it in a way to say it was an accident. And they might have found in later years that actually it was a terrorist attack or they were shot. But the family kept it quiet in order to not bring pain. But actually what it does by not speaking out the truth, it somehow can leave someone in a very kind of precarious and misunderstood situation like Kelly. So I wanted to look at how information being conveyed between Lauren and Kelly and their understanding of the past is quite different, and how, it is troubling them in their own ways. But by the end of the film, we realize that when the family begins to accept the past, what happened to father, what happened to mother, that somehow that's where the real healing can begin.
And in that sense, the film gives a hopeful note for
I hope so.
both
Yeah,
the sisters.
I really do. Yeah, it's and it's funny. I feel like the ending is it's kind of this place where both the sisters have faced their darkest fear, and they even questioned that their mother loved them. Of course she did. She loved them the best she could, everything that she was experiencing. And I think the recognition, the acceptance of that is the thing that allows allows them to begin to heal. But I think when they step out of the car and they go towards the emergency services, the question then becomes, do we know how to look after them? You know, they need our help, but can we give them the help they need?
All right. Wow, that's a very deep analysis, but I mean, this is something that we need to think of while watching the film. Another question, which is actually similar to my question, is from our YouTube audience. Hello, Miss Cathy. I really love the chemistry of the sisters in the movie. However, I just found out the passing of Mikugan in 2019. Do you mind if I ask, how do you and your crew deal with the grief, since the film was still in post-production during that time? And my additional question is, were there any changes that you made to accommodate the passing of Mika?
Well, we hadn't picture locked the film yet. And her death was very sudden. It was cancer. It was 5 weeks from diagnosis to death. So it was very fast. So it was an enormous toll on all of us. You know, you can imagine making a film together for 5 years, you know, and then to be in the middle of post-production, it was enormous, the toll it took on us. But I think, you know, anyone seeing the film, you know, you realize how uniquely special she was, and how could we not finish the film, you know, because everything that she had given to Kelly, the love and understanding she had given to this quite complicated, troubled character, that like it needed to be out there, it needed to be shared, and that legacy needed to begin. So it did take a huge toll to finish the film. In terms of, did it finish much? Did it change much? We had some pickups to do, like just 2 days of pickups, but they were very small, detailed stuff. But that had all been decided months before Nika had passed away, so it was just a case of shooting them, and that was very difficult. I think my own understanding of grief changed a lot, you know, in the process of making this film. You know, I had experienced, you know, up to this point, I'd experienced grandparents and a cousin dying, but I'd never experienced someone so close to me, you know, a best friend dying. So it made me realize just how complicated and full grief can feel. And I'm sure somehow that transferred into how we handled the music and you know, what it meant, you know, what grief can mean. It's a lot of pain, but it's also a love. And I think that's, you know, I understood that much more than I ever knew I would.
Another question from our audience. You actually mentioned this briefly in the beginning. Hi, Cathy. Is there any particular person who inspired the main characters in the film, because they are such a complex character? You mentioned that this is based on not fully based.
Inspired by a real event. It was inspired. Yeah. The motorway scene is inspired by a real event, and the footage is available online. Madness in the Fast Lane, it's called. But we spent a number of years researching this, and that was a mixture of a meeting. We met 2 sisters who had a shared psychosis, and they were very kind to offer up, you know, time with both actors and understanding how psychosis sort of happened in their life and how it's changed their relationship. And I think it made me realize that how unique it is for every single person. Like, you know, with psychosis, the past can become present and it feels very real. So we realize that everyone's past is different. So it made us kind of, you know, respect the uniqueness of each character's journey, I think, and rather than doing broad strokes of mental illness. And I think because of the amount of attention that the actors did to this performance, I do feel it goes beyond, you know, here's a film about mental illness. It's not that. It's about, here's a film about 2 sisters who are facing something really dark and complicated. And Nika and Nora Jane had their own experiences of mental health issues within their own families and suicide within their own families. So for them, it was very crucial that these characters felt really lived in.
And the film was released during the pandemic last year, but has it met audiences in person in cinemas, and what was their reaction like?
It only has recently been released in the UK and
I
Ireland.
see.
So
Okay.
yes, you're right. It virtually, did the festivals. I didn't leave home. But as of September the 3rd, it got released in cinemas here. And that's been really fascinating. The feedback has been really, really strong, really powerful. And it's the first time where people have come up and talked to me. It's not through, an internet Q&A, but people have come up and said, one person in particular said, I've experienced psychosis. And she said, I've really felt like I seen a version of myself on screen. I was able to see how my family behaved on screen. And, it meant a lot for me to see that. And it's, and she even said, I was thinking about writing my own story. And she said, seeing that now has given me the courage to go and do it. And, so it was small moments like that. We didn't have a big red carpet experience. We didn't travel halfway across the world to a festival, but it was a much more genuine experience of releasing a film, I think. Because we were straight into not a festival going audience, your general public, and, no messing.
So in a way, your film has touched so many people, and they're willing to open up. They can relate to the characters, especially.
I find especially because we began in Toronto Film Festival, and so our main interaction would have been with journalists, and so it would have been very generic questions. But when it came to doing the press for the film in Ireland and the UK, especially Ireland, we couldn't get over the questions that we were being asked. They were so detailed. They were so everybody was looking at a different section of the film.
Yeah.
And it made me realize that each person is taking something very different from this film. And I felt like a lot of the themes is quite inherent to an Irish audience. And I feel like it's putting a language on things we haven't yet had an opportunity to talk about. And I guess the real interesting thing for me next is how transferable is this story? Does it work? I haven't had that experience because I haven't sat in an audience in a country to know, where are they laughing, where are they gasping, where are they getting fidgety. So that's an experience I don't know yet. But it's great to like festivals like yourselves who were showing this the film, and and people are asking questions and connected to it. So that's good.
I feel like this is the kind of film that is timeless. People will see it or pick it up the first time in years to come, and yet the characters and the story will remain timeless because people can still relate years after. That's what I think.
Well, that'd be nice.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Cathy.
Thank you.
It's great to hear from you directly. I really wish if it is not for a pandemic, we could meet each other in person. But well, good luck for your next projects. And before we leave, let's take a picture together. Our technical host will guide us on how to do it.
Okay.
Fina?
Yes, hello everyone. I am the host and we will do the photo session soon. Please look at the camera and I will count to 3. Show your best pose and smile. 1, 2, 3. Nice, excellent. Let's do it once again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Yes, have a good weekend, Cathy. Thank you.
You too. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
That was our conversation, a very deep conversation actually, with Cathy Brady, the director of Wildfire. Teman-teman masih bisa menonton film Wildfire ini di Festival Scope karena filmnya sudah tayang mulai kemarin hari Kamis dan masih bisa ditonton atau masih tersedia 5 hari ke depan. Dan untuk penanya terpilih dari yang sudah bertanya hari ini, Tiara Sekar Ayu, nanti selamat Anda mendapatkan merchandise dari Europe On Screen, nanti akan dihubungi oleh tim Europe On Screen. So that's it for this session. Coming up next, we will have another film talk session with the producer of Pelican Blood from Germany. It will be hosted by my colleague Putri. Akan ada sesi tanya jawab bersama produser film Pelican Blood dari Jerman. Dan nanti malam saya akan kembali hadir bersama sutradara dari Inggris, Alim Khan, untuk film After Love. I will be back later at 8 p.m. jam 8 malam to have a film talk session with Alim Khan, the director of After Love. I'm Noval, signing off. Goodbye.